Pittsburgh Steelers fans, what's going on? This is Jeff Hartman, senior editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, with you for another episode of the Steelers preview. And this week, we are previewing a very big game, at least for these three gentlemen on this show. Why? Because we live in the state of Maryland, and they, being the Steelers, are playing the Baltimore Ravens. I don't care what the Steelers did last week. I don't care what their record is currently. This is a big week for the three gentlemen on this show right now, and let me bring them in. First, we'll start with Bryan Anthony Davis. What's going on, Bryan?
I tell you what, I get that special feeling when it's Ravens week. I love it. And it's not just because of them being in Baltimore, but yeah, it is. But it's just for the fact that, the Steelers elevate themselves when they play the Ravens. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of respect between the two franchises. And you've got to admit that they may hate each other, and we as fans hate each other. But when I talk to a Ravens fan, you know what I tell them? Hey, we've got one thing in common. We hate the state of Ohio. And they're like, yes, we do.
Just get rid of it. I mean, I have family that live there. I give them a chance to get out of there. But once they're out, let's just blow it up. It's not worth anything. Dave Schofield, welcome to the show. How's it going?
I'm here. I'm ready to... I don't know. I'm ready to talk Steelers. I'm ready to move on to the next game. I really am. It's just, it's still miserable thinking back to the last one. And you hope that it's a better product on Sunday.
Well, let's not talk about it then. Let's stop beating around the bush. I have a question for you all. We're going to get right into it. Everyone's always like, let's get right into it. All right, let's talk right about the Steelers. All right. So here's the question. The Baltimore Ravens, when they come to Heinz Field in week 13, will have the choice whether they choose heads or tails. Let's say they lose, and the Steelers have the option to either take the football or to defer their possession to the second half. They won the toss in week 13. They deferred their possession. The Bengals go down the field, score within minutes, it felt like, and now all of a sudden they're facing a deficit. If you're the head coach, are you taking the ball or are you deferring to the second half? Bryan, what are you doing?
I'm always the guy that defers to the second half, but I'm kind of inclined when you're in Heinz Field and you're in the national televised 425 game that you want to get out there as fast as you possibly can and have a method to go ahead and score and get those terrible towels waving and put them in a deficit first. If it's possible, I don't know, but that's what I'm hoping for this week, and that's what I would do.
Okay. Dave, what do you think?
I really want to give a Dave answer, but before I do, I have to ask you guys, because I asked my brother this on Tuesday. What is a Dave answer?
It's not answering the question. It's literally saying well, I would do this, but then I would also do that, and never really defining one way or the other.
Redefining the question in two different ways to answer it to answer on both extremes. Is that correct?
Yeah, that sounds pretty.
That's my definition and my
more formal way of saying it, but yes.
Yes, I would say I really. As a coach, you get a feeling of practice throughout the week of which one you want to do. That's what I always did. I generally wanted to defer, but if it was a different week of practice and you had a different game plan for it, you might want to take the ball. So I understand exactly what Bryan was saying. To me, the only reason I would still have the tendency to defer is because we said we're not going to talk about what happened last week, but even in a situation like that, if you get the ball coming out of the half, you always feel like, hey, if you can start the second half by putting points on the board, even if you're down, that gives you a chance to get back in it. And if you're up, it gives you a chance to get further ahead. And if you're tied, it gives you a chance to control everything yourself. It's not about starting the game as much of how much I like having the ball coming out of halftime, but I also could understand the other way if that's your point of emphasis. Last year, I never would have considered it because the Steelers never scored early or even early in this season, but they have been better at least putting points on the board on their opening drive. So if you take the ball, you have to put points on the board.
Dave,
was that a good enough Dave answer?
No, yeah, it was. It's perfect for you. But do you take the ball or not?
So to me, I would still defer.
Okay, there you go.
I said that. Come on. I said that along the way.
If you did that, literally, I felt like I was just seeing mathematical symbols in my head. I'm like, oh my gosh, has he answered the question yet? Or...
Yes, I answered the question, and we're back.
We're back. All right. Okay, so for me anymore, I would say take the football. I know that Steelers offense is not doing anything crazy. It's just that you get a chance to put points on the board. Or everything that you say, like you could also double it with the beginning of the game. Like, the second half, you could get a chance to go and score points and can, extend a lead. Well, if you could get a lead, that would be helpful. The Steelers were playing behind the entire game against the Bengals last week. And this brings up a good point. $5 from Steel Dog 88. He says, how important do you believe it is to have an opening drive touchdown in this game? Brian, what do you think?
Absolutely. And I think with my last answer talking about getting the ball first, I really think if you could run down that field and get a touchdown right away, it bodes well for you. Now, we've seen them do that. We saw them do that in the Detroit game. Yeah, they didn't win that game. They tied that game. But I just think this is going to be an emotional game for this team with everybody that's not playing, with what happened last week, this is where you get the come to Jesus moment in the locker room. And it kind of sounded like Mike Tomlin is ready to prepare that right now to just say, boys, we've got to get going. This is almost a Bill Cowher 2005. We've got an 8-game playoff right now. I don't know how many games are left, but what I'm saying is it seems like December 11th of 2005. And they're going to play against the Bears. So if you get that touchdown, man, those towels are going to be flying. That place is going to go crazy. They're probably going to play Renegade 17 times in this game. And so this is just one of those games that if they're not up, they don't need to dress next week.
Let me ask you a follow-up. Is Renegade, I know there's been very few times they've done it more than once. Why don't they do it more than once? I feel like if it's a big moment, crank it up. Let's get the fans going, especially right now, the way this team's trending, it's not good. You all have been there more than I have. I mean, I can only think, let's hear, it was the Dallas game when Tony Romo was the quarterback in 2008. I think they played it twice that game. They played it twice against the Ravens, did they not?
On Christmas, yes.
Okay.
If the moment calls for it, do it. Right, Brian?
Well, heck,
yeah,
I could have a Renegade moment every drive.
No, yeah, but then it means nothing. Renegade is supposed to signify that this is the moment. That this is the moment of the game where it's the big moment. It's okay to have more than one big moment, but you can't have 7 of them at the same time either. I get disappointed when you go to a game and there is no Renegade, because that happens.
They do that.
What the first game that I took I guess I should call my nephew, he's my niece's husband, took him to the playoff game against the Ravens at Heinz Field. That was the week after the week 17 injury. There was no Renegade. There was no opportunity where it mattered to even
because they were down.
Think about it. If last week would have been a home game, would they have played Renegade at any point? No.
No,
probably not.
No. Renegade is relegated to the fourth quarter and overtime. That's just
let me tell you something here. We had an interview. Michael Beck and I had an interview with Jordan Dangerfield last year, and we asked him about Renegade. And Dave and I, when we talk to Steelers, when we get that opportunity, we ask them about Renegade. He's like, "Oh, that song pumps us up. We're on the side when we hear that song start. We get really pumped up. We know the crowd's getting pumped up, but we feel it too." So I was watching on Facebook Live or Facebook one time when Arthur Moats is at a diner with his family. It was after his first year, just his first year of the Steelers. He was going into his second year, and it came on, and he put his phone on and everything. Yeah, it's Renegade. It's my song. It's our song. Pittsburgh. And this was like June. He was all pumped up because Renegade was on. So a lot of them really do get pumped up with that song. So maybe Chase Claypool's right. They need more music.
Oh gosh.
Can I answer the super chat?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I think would be extremely important to have an opening touchdown drive in this game, because if we look at a nice common opponent, let's say like let's say Cleveland Browns, the Steelers beat the Browns 15-10. The Ravens beat the Browns 16-10. The points were at a premium in those games. If this is going to be a points or a premium game, then an opening touchdown, if it's your only touchdown, just think of how important that is, that you're setting the tone there. If it's a low-scoring game and one team scores an opening touchdown and the other one doesn't, I'm going to say advantage team that scores the touchdown, obviously. So I think it's very important. Did I do good?
Yeah,
Okay.
for sure. Yeah, you're good. Okay, so let's get away from the start of the game, which I still think is very important. And let's talk about the headline of this podcast, the title of this podcast, which is that there are still some positives to take away from the season. And what I want to do is just kind of bounce around, and we can just kind of just add a list together. There's nothing definitive. There's not 1 through 5. It's just basically, hey, what do you think is something that's still considered a positive about this team? I feel like it could be a player, it could be a position group, it could be anything that you feel could be a positive. And also, let's add in a different little niche to this here, and that is there are a lot of people that think this season is done. It's over, and that's fine. Everyone's entitled to their own opinion. So then what would be a reason why you keep watching? I think that would be something that would be deemed a positive as well. Like, why would you still be invested in the team, even if you think, well, my goodness, if you're in the live chat right now, you're probably still invested in the team. But if you're listening to our podcast, I'm assuming you are. I hope you are. But let's start with Bryan. Bryan, you thought of this idea. So what would be a positive for you?
It's pride. You know, a lot of people have accused them of losing. And they have been losing, but losing their focus, losing their pride, just, tuning out. The Q word's coming out. The Q word came out in week 3, and we talked about that ad nauseum last week. And I thought they would really step up because they were accused of being quitters. Now they're being accused of not only being quitters, they're being accused of just being a team that has quit on their coach, a team that's quit on their quarterback, a quarterback that's quit on them. They're getting the U word, undisciplined. And that very well may be true, but these guys are listening. Now you have Rocky Bleier, 4 Super Bowls. You have Ryan Clark, 2 Super Bowls that they took it home in Pittsburgh. They're calling this team out too. And you could tune that out all you want, but Rocky Bleier's been away from this team for 40 years as a player. He's been out of the locker room for 40 years. Ryan Clark's been gone about 7 years, and they follow this team and they love this team, and they have the pride to say, this is not the way it's supposed to be. So I think pride has a lot to do with it, to come out and just say, it's that come to moment that we talked about. It's like, all right, now's the time to step up. We're the number 1 seed in the conference is coming into our house, and we're being accused of being done for a long time, but we know that's not us. So let's band together. Let's forget about the petty stuff and go out there and win. And so that's what I'm thinking, that this is a reason not to quit watching this team, because we've seen them pull the 2005s. We've seen them pull those moments together where they step up, where they lose against a bad team or struggle against the Bears and the Lions and come out and beat a top seed. We saw them do it just 3 years ago when they beat New England on December 18th, and Dave was there. So we've seen that. So what I'm saying is they have the ability to pull this together. This is the veterans saying, all right, let's just cut out all the noise and let's go do it.
All right, Dave, what about you? What's a positive?
A positive from this Steelers team. I'm going to look even more in recent weeks. Because you go back to like the Chicago game, and that was one where it stumbled a little bit. Do you know what this team has been able to do defensively? And some of you might say, well, of course, last week didn't matter, but they aren't getting burned by the tight end anymore. Have you noticed that? And that's something you have to worry about with this Baltimore team coming up. That's one positive that they've been doing that you could say even applies to this week. I mean, last week, what Uzama had like 9 yards or something like that.
Yeah, like 1 catch.
Detroit, their best receiver was Hawkinson, no catches. Okay, the weekend between Cook had like only wasn't impressive. Now, granted, though, I still think Uzama's a pretty good tight end, but they didn't have to throw the ball last week. Hawkinson's really good. If they focus on taking away the tight end, they've been doing a good job. And to me, I think the main person that's been doing that the best, someone who has been playing better than what sometimes fans give him credit for, is Terrell Edmonds. That I think that he's really helped out with that. So that's a positive. They're like, even when the defense is getting gashed, there were things that were issues that, I mean, what was it, 2 years ago? I can't even remember exactly. Brian will know. When that was the biggest thing, the Steelers can't stop tight ends. I mean, Gronk was always running wild on him and things like that. So it might have been more than 2 years ago. But that is something that a part of the defense that I would say, well, at least they're not that much Swiss cheese.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. I like that. My positive are the rookies and the young players on this football team.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of them, and sometimes you forget about that. And I know that we all want to be harsh critics of Kendrick Green and Dan Moore, and hey, they're putting their tape out there for everyone to see. And I guarantee you they're hearing about it in team meetings. But there's also Najee Harris and Pat Freiermuth and Trey Norwood, who's a 7th-round draft pick and is becoming a pretty interesting and versatile tool for this defense, especially if they were to have both of their cornerbacks healthy and their safeties there. So I still look at this team and see the positive is some of this young talent that is only going to get better. Say what you want about Kendrick Green. Say what you want. Dan Moore's feet are too slow. Kendrick Green's hands. Kendrick Green's too small. Kendrick Green's not small enough. Dan Moore's too slow. Has no punch. They're rookies. I mean, can anyone tell me the last time a rookie has stepped in and been flawless? Don't say Ben. He wasn't. Ben was on a great team, went on a great run, and a lot of people would say that they won despite Ben Roethlisberger in many occasions. He was not perfect. These players aren't perfect either. Najee Harris is good. He has a lot of room for improvement. Pat Freiermuth, we're getting to see these players develop. I think that's something that's very positive. The future of those players is a positive to me. And so I'm anxious to see what these players can do. You know, are they going to hit the rookie wall? I don't know. That's intriguing. I want to watch. So that's one for me. Brian, do you have another one?
Yes, I do. I want to bring up one player that was much maligned last season, and I think he is having a Steeler MVP season, and that is Deontay Johnson. Now, we looked at the winners and losers last week from Jeff Hartman. It was nice to see Deontay Johnson on the winners list, and it seems like he's on there a lot more each and every week. This guy is becoming a very reliable target for Ben Roethlisberger and for anybody. I really love to see what he's doing. I don't believe Chris Collinsworth said that's going to be a drop last week. It was when it's knocked out of your hands. I don't think it's a drop. So I think he's still considered dropless for the year. He is really taking this offense to higher levels as far as the receivers go. And I know we've been saying that this team doesn't have a number one receiver, but he's probably closest to being a number one receiver on that team. He's going to eclipse 1,000 yards on the season. He is a guy that I love watching each and every week. And I feel that he is going to turn into a superstar each and every week. And by next season, we're going to be going crazy watching Deontay Johnson, and crazy in a good way with everything that he could provide on that field. So watch him the next 6 games, and that's excitement personified.
I agree. And that's something Michael Beck and I talked about on my Let's Ride, which we're on Friday, about the pillars that could be Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson at wide receiver and filling in around them. And I think that's a tantalizing duo if they can mature and get better together. Dave, anything else positive for you?
Boz. I mean, you don't have to worry about if the Steelers offense can move the ball to the 35-yard line. If they choose to, they're going to get points. The kicking game has been not something to worry about. So if the Steelers are in a close game and they have the ball and all they need is a field goal, you can feel like all you got to do is get close enough to give him a chance, and he's going to come through. That's a really good feeling to have. The Steelers didn't have it in the Cleveland game. It's amazing that they won that game. But like I say, if they would have had Boz, they might have settled for field goals when they had to go for it on 4th down. That's beside the point. But the whole notion that it's not a concern every time it comes down the field, that's really nice. There's enough other things to be concerned about with the Steelers. You don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to go with some of the mainstays on the Steelers that are still positives. Like sometimes I feel like we spend so much time complaining about certain players and certain things. And again, we're fans. That's what we do. Let's not forget how great of a season Cam Hayward's having. I mean, he's having, in my opinion, maybe his greatest season as a Steeler, as a professional. And that's also coming out. He's had seasons with double-digit sacks. He's playing better. he doesn't have the help around him. Like Cam Hayward, positive. Now, Brian, I'm going to throw it back to you. You can either give another positive or give people a reason why they should keep watching and staying tuned. Not just to us, to the Steelers.
Well, I got to tell you, I was going to talk about Cam Hayward next, and because I am so, in fact, I'm on the bandwagon that if I had a vote for Defensive Player of the Year, I'm going with Cam over TJ Watt this season. And that might be crazy, but I just love what he's doing. I think he's having just a phenomenal year. And it's great to see him each and every week and even hear him on the microphone, even when it's bad. This guy kind of calms me down a little bit. He fires me up and calms me down. I love everything about him as a leader. We hear a lot of talk about there being no leaders on this team. You can't say that when number 97 is there. So you can say that there's not a lot, but Cam is there and Cam has a voice. And I hope they continue to listen to this guy. As far as other positives, I had Cam all queued up. I will bring up a guy that another guy that's been much maligned in the past, and Dave Schofield brought him up already. Is there any reason to complain about Trey Edmonds? I mean, excuse me. No, because
there is. He's not over 53. Get him off the practice squad. Yeah.
Is there a reason to complain about Fadarius Terrell Edmonds? Really, I think he's quietly had his most solid year, and he's beneficial to this team. So when a lot of people are disappointed when they say that they've re-signed him next year, I think you've got to hope for that. And I think you got to see him continue to work his walk year and try out for this team again. And I think the tryout's very successful. So I'm going to say not Trey. I'm not going to say Tremaine. I'm going to say Terrell.
Very good. Dave, throw it over to you.
All right. If I'm like, I just gave a philosophy the first time, then I gave a player the next time. I'll go player again, if that's all right. I'm going with Muth. Okay. When you draft someone in the second round that's a tight end, you hope that they get there eventually. I already feel like he's done more as a rookie than what we expected as fans. I see why the Steelers felt that was important to invest there, where they took – it was a position of need. It really was. People were like, did they really need a tight end? Well, they only had Ebron for one more year. And remember, I say it with the exception of Najee Harris at running back, most of the Steelers draft picks aren't necessarily for this year. They're for the next year. I mean, if you look at their past history, this year they didn't have that luxury because of the whole salary cap issue. But the pick of Freiermuth to be there, and the question was, will he be the guy next year? When Ebron's gone, or can he even take over this year? Yeah, he took it over, and he took it over early. And not only that, I feel like he's got a Steelers mentality from what we've seen. We don't know as much from these players because you don't get as much from the locker room from them with everything going on. But it's just, there's a lot of positives you could take from watching Muth.
That's a good one. Brian, do you have any other positives? I was just going to go with why people should still tune in. If you have another one, go for it.
I'm actually saving it for my final thoughts, Jeff.
Dave, do you have any other final, or do you have any more?
Oh my goodness! I mean, I just said one. Where
no,
are you?
I'm just saying. I'm trying to transition into a different topic.
Go for it. I'm good.
Okay.
That was good enough for me.
Okay,
because you hit Cam Hayward and stuff like that.
So for me, one of the reasons why, and even if this season continues on the current trajectory, like I want fans to do me a favor, and that's to sit back and think about what the Steelers have had since 2004 when they drafted Ben Roethlisberger 11th overall. And we don't know if this is Ben's last year or not. But if it is, understand what you're watching. And even though it's not pretty, and there are times where it's downright ugly, appreciate the career that he's had. And also think back to Detroit. When they played Detroit in Week 10, what we saw, Mason Rudolph was a quarterback. And think if this is what we have waiting for us, just it sounds silly, but treasure every moment that you have watching number 7 play. And it might, like I said, he's going to have games like he did last week. But if he throws a couple touchdowns, I just think it's one of those things where with Ben, You take the good with the bad, you always have. And he's brought a lot of success to this team, and I'm going to miss the crap out of that guy when he's done. But enjoy every game that he's still a quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's something for me. Brian, I'll throw it over to you.
I have
Dave,
one word.
Dave, do you want to go?
I was just going to comment on Jeff's one thing real quick.
Okay,
one
go
line.
ahead.
And that was when Jeff is old and he has his 432 grandkids, he'll be able to say, I got this. I watched Ben Roethlisberger play his entire career.
You're damn right.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is, just because it's now, when we want to win now, we're like, we don't want Ben next year. That's fine. But how many people do we still find on here that are like, I saw every snap that Terry Bradshaw ever took with the Steelers? You know, that's what we're going to be able to say when we're old about Ben Roethlisberger. So the fact that we're still living it now, just remember that how you're going to feel in 25 years from now.
I just hope he has. I want one. Like I said, even if this season continues on the current trajectory, like I said, I just want one more game. Just give me one more game where it's like that was a Big Ben game. Like something happens, a big moment, a huge play. He escapes something. Like, I don't think he hasn't had it yet. I mean, I do know that the Chicago game, bringing him down and getting the game-winning field goal was nice and all, but I'm talking about give me one more last go around. You know, one more trip in the sun, as they would say in baseball. Brian, what do you think?
Well, first of all, I've got to correct Dave. When Jeff is 60 years from now, when Jeff is older, he's still going to look like this. And he's still going to sound like this.
Still be doing podcasts.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to sound perfect just like he is now.
He might not remember his name. Or no, he'll say hashtag J Hartman _
Who knows
I am
literally.
But I'm the senior member of this team. The only thing I was going to say to Jeff about that, it was going to be Ben.
Ben. Absolutely. Gosh, I just remember those early days when Big Ben mania, the way it took wild in Pittsburgh. It was nuts. Like there are people that have, you know, there are people that didn't live through that. Like I know I've had people comment to me on Twitter and say, "Oh, Jeff, my son listens to you. He's a middle schooler. He wasn't alive for the early Ben years, you know." And it was crazy. It was crazy. Mule Skinner says Jeff wants Ben to play in his 90. Yeah, I do. Hell yeah, I do. He's my favorite player. Like, come on, give me a break. Come on. Yeah, I love Ben Roethlisberger. Always have. Doesn't mean he's perfect, but I always have. All right, Brian, anything to add to this in terms of why people should stay invested with the team beyond, even if things keep going the way they are?
Actually, yeah, I'm going to forget about final thoughts. I'm going to say it now.
You say it now.
You're a Steeler fan, and you crave this team. This team got shellacked last week, 41-10. And we had close to 500 just on the live broadcast on YouTube. Everybody is tuning in. The very next day, and I'm not trying to get into numbers and bragging, but the very next day on Monday, after that loss, we had the greatest day in the history of our podcast platform with downloads. And people want to tune in and they want to find out. And that means that it's happening everywhere. If you're not checking on BTSC, you're checking in on the Steelers somewhere if you love this team. So the reason to continue to watch this team, sure, yeah, you can go into hibernation and say, wake me up when in 2022. You can do that. But this is a team that we have not seen go through that long stretch, that dormant decade. A lot of people like to talk about the 80s as being a bad decade. I mean, gosh, they were in an AFC championship game. They went far in a playoff game that year. That was a terrible decade for us because we're used to greatness. And why are we struggling right now watching this team? Because we're used to not seeing them go 3, 4, 5 years in a row without going to the playoffs. We're used to seeing a contender on this team. And this team is going to fix themselves. Is it going to be in 2021? Maybe, maybe not. A lot of you might say, definitely not. And I'm cool with that. But the thing about this is if you love this team, you're going to watch them grow. Just like we did back in 2003, when that was a disastrous 5-11 season, I believe. And it sowed the seeds for number 7, which Jeff Hartman just talked about. So, when you love this team, you love the warts and all. When your kids getting D's in school, you still love them. You might not be, buying them a couple Xboxes, but you're still going to support him in everything he does, and you're going to watch him get things together or her get things together. It's just like that. So this is the thing about this team. You could be frustrated with them all you want, but you're never going to stop loving them because this team's like family to you. I don't see any one of you, even the most pessimistic fans, going away from this team, because you could turn it off for a week and say, I'm done with them. But you're checking the score, or you're checking BTSC to see what happened. And then the next week you're like, all right, I'm going to come back and see what's going on. So when you love a team like this, you could be so disappointed, but you can't go away, and you won't.
What kind of fan jumps ship anyways? Like,
hold on.
Give me a break.
You're kind of going into something that I had, but we might need to save it for the second half, though, right?
Let's save it for the second half. And I want to bring up Steel Dog 88 real quick. Give us $2. Thank you very much for the tip. He said, Ben Roethlisberger is what made me a Steeler fan. You are not alone in that regard for this younger generation. So we're going to take a quick break. If you're watching live on YouTube or Facebook, don't go anywhere because we aren't going anywhere. If you're listening on our podcast platform, head on over to part 2. Dave's going to give his answer to the question about Big Ben and the legacy. And then we're also going to be talking about some of his comments he made, trivia, predictions, and everything else. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, Pittsburgh Steelers fans, welcome back to the second part of the Steelers preview. I'm Jeff Hartman, joined as always by Bryan Anthony Davis, our podcast producer, and Dave Schofield, the editor of BTSC. And we are talking about all things Steelers, and on the cusp of us talking about the good things about the Steelers season, we started talking about why you as a fan and why we as fans are going to stay involved, stay engaged. Well, because we're fans, number one, we're addicts to this stupid team, but also for a lot of other reasons like Big Ben. Now, Dave, you wanted to say something at the end of part 1. I want to give you a chance to chime in now.
Yeah, it's not as much about Big Ben, but it's a reason to stay engaged.
There you go.
And this is it. Okay, this is going out to some of you in the live chat, a lot of you on Steelers Twitter or social media and whatnot. This might hit home a little bit, but this is what it was. I'm not going to rant. I'm just going to tell you how it is. Okay, she rejected you. It doesn't mean she's ugly. Okay, whenever I'm sorry, this is going to be from a guy's perspective, but you have this, you have the girl, you are madly in love with this girl, and you're even just trying to maybe end up in the friend zone for a little bit or whatever, just to get close to her and everything, and you finally take your shot, and she rejects you, and you are hurt. And all of a sudden, she's terrible. She's ugly. You never cared about her or anything like that. That's a lie. You love her so much that you don't know what else to do other than run her down. And that's what you're doing about the Steelers right now. And you know what? The Steelers aren't playing well. They're not. But some of you are taking all of this so much to the extreme. Oh, I'm not going to watch this team for another 5 years when they finally get it together, or all these other things. It's not cool to love the Steelers anymore, so you got to hate the Steelers. And because you have such an emotional attachment. And if it's not cool to love them and you're afraid to say that, you know what, I love this team, but they are not very good right now, you have to act like it is the worst thing you've ever seen. You are treating the Steelers like the girl that rejected you, and now you want to call her ugly. That's what you're doing. And guess what? If that girl changed your mind and she wanted to go out on a date with you, guess what you're going to do? You're going to go running back to her and saying that she's the most wonderful thing ever. So if the Steelers somehow, against all odds, pull it together, guess what? You're going to come running back and talk about, wow, how this team overcame. You might not have confidence in it, just like I wouldn't go betting that girl's going to suddenly change your mind and say you're the most wonderful thing ever. But if it did happen, just think that's how you would be. I understand it's because we're so emotionally involved and intertwined in it that's how you are. But you don't have to take it to the extreme of that you're going. It's still okay to recognize that there are at least 1 or 2 or 3 or 5 or 7 positives on this team. It's not, and it's not being a homer. It's realizing, hey, if you have some positives, that's what you need to build around, and that's what you need to work on, and that's where you need to go. I'm done.
I like it. I'm going to bring up a comment here. Our own Chris, I think it's Pugh is how you say his last name. He said the Steelers are emotional abusers for us. That is correct. It is a dysfunctional relationship. There is definitely abuse going on, and it's always one way. They're always abusing us. We never abuse them unless they read our live chat. Okay. Let's talk about something else. So this week, Ben Roethlisberger made some comments, and I'm not going to read them, about the locker room and the tradition of the Pittsburgh Steelers and some of the things that they do or don't do anymore. Excuse me. And he went in to talk about how, using the example of music in the locker room, how when he was coming into the team and then as he was becoming a leader in the team, he was the one that would turn the music off. In case Dan Rooney came in, you wanted to make sure you heard every word that he said. Whether he was talking to you or not, he said he was like a grandfather to everyone. So I'm listening to all this. I'm sure it's been discussed on other shows. I'm not the first person to talk about this on our podcast platform. And I do talk about it more on my Let's Ride podcast on Friday morning, if you want to check it out. When I read those articles, I read his transcripts. I listened to the interview, and I read the transcripts, and I said, you know what I thought? Now I want to get your all's take on this. I felt that unintentionally, that was a shot at the current ownership. Because when he said Dan Rooney, when he walked in that door, he demanded everyone's respect. Turn the music off because Dan's here. Well, last I checked, there's still a Rooney upstairs. And does that Rooney not demand the same amount of respect? Does that Rooney not demand that players listen to them? Do they not listen to them? Do they not have to turn the music off for them? Am I overreacting? Am I reading too much into this? Dave, I'll let you go first.
Maybe a little overreact, because the thing is, think about it. I've met Jeff's father once. I've met Bad's father. I don't know that any of you all have met my father. Are we our fathers? We're a different generation. We're like them a lot. Do you like your dad a lot, Jeff, or no?
I'm a lot like my dad.
But let's just say how we raise our kids. Do we raise our kids exactly like how our parents raised their kids? No, because generational things are different. And the fact that Art is not Dan, I think Art would be the first one to admit that he's not Dan. So I don't know that it was an intentional shot or if it was elevating Dan Rooney to where he should be, because he did so much for this franchise. I could see it your way. I don't know that that's what he meant by it.
No, I don't think that's what he meant by it, but I'm reading into it. I'm looking at the context and saying, like, I don't know. There was something that when I read it and then I listened to it, I listened to it twice because I listened to it again after I read the transcripts, because sometimes you lose context when you read something. But Brian, I want to give you a chance. Yeah. What do you think?
It's like a Lifetime original movie is what it is. And when I say that, it's
Meredith Baxter Burney.
Yes. It's a child crying out for attention from his father in this point. Just like, hey, we had this before. We want this again. We want you to be involved in our lives, Papa Art too. That's really what I think that he's saying. If that's, they had that. They had that close knit, and when they lost him in 2017, there's nobody to fill the void, and maybe that's what they're asking for. Now, I agree with Dave and about the fact that we aren't our fathers, but it's still, you still have, when you become the patriarch of the family, there's people that are looking for that leadership, not just from the coach, but from above. And when we Dave and I talked to Ike Taylor last year, and Ike Taylor but he was so proud about being with all the Rooneys and just him as a pallbearer at Dan's family, at Dan's funeral. And that's the relationship that everybody seemed to have with Dan Rooney. And that's this relationship that guys like Terry Bradshaw and Joe Green and all of those guys had with Art Rooney Sr. So I don't know what the relationship's like, but if it sounds like He's saying that, hey, we don't have somebody coming in the locker room and hanging out with us in the same, that there's a void, and he's the one that they would love to fill it.
I don't want to make it sound like Ben was like a shot across the bow. It was just the way that it read was like, okay, so if Art Sr. did these things and Dan did these things, what the heck is Art the second doing? I mean, is he just sitting in his owner's box? He's pretty involved from what I've read and seen. Dave, did you want to say something?
I was going to say, just think of how much everything the NFL has changed. Society has changed. When Ben Roethlisberger came into the league, the reason Dan and Art can be different is because the world was different. I mean, we didn't have smartphones when Ben Roethlisberger started off. I mean, Ben is a different generation than these other guys on the team. He's almost old enough to be their dad.
Well, but I'm not talking about Ben. I'm talking about the ownership.
But what I'm saying is, but that is why Ben would relate to Dan's way of doing things more than how things are going under Art, because the world is different and people have to.
Art's like Art's sliding into DMs of the players, like, "Hey, how's it going?"
No,
Did you have a good
I'm just saying.
today?
Who knows how Dan Rooney would handle the players of today right now? We'll never know because he's not with us anymore.
He would do it the same.
He would do it the same way.
The
same way his dad did it.
I understand, but the question is, how would it work?
Hold on. Don't you think they'd be saying the same thing about Art Sr. and Dan? It's a different generation. You know, the old man comes down chewing on his stogie, and he's just, "Hey, buddy, how's it going?" And then Dan, he was doing the similar things, but he did it his way. I'm wondering, what's Art doing? Is he texting players? Is he FaceTiming them in the locker room? I doubt it. I mean, I'm not saying that Art Rooney II is a bad owner or anything like that, or he's a not good, not as good as his dad and grandfather. But it just made me think a little bit about like what some Matty Peverill said Art2's doing TikToks with.
Insta.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Insta face.
I guess my thing is the NFL to the 70s, even to the NFL to the 90s of those 20 years, I think is much more similar than what the NFL is from the 2000s to the 2020. I think the last 20 years.
You're basing your solely on the player, not so much the game or anything like that.
Both. I mean, how much different is is the NFL? But more the player than the game.
Go ahead, Brian.
I need to chime in on this. I want to get back to Ike Taylor a second. Ike Taylor looked at Dan as a father figure, and he really did. You know, and we've talked about before on how the players loved Dick LeBeau. So
I'm sorry, Brian, you got to stop. Are you looking at Maddie's?
Oh,
you got to bring it up.
Do you want me to bring it up?
Yeah, please, because I turned the comments off.
Okay. Matty P says that's the true problem. Ben deleted his MySpace, and Art2 is trying to encourage locker room on there.
That's really good. Thank you, Matty P, for ruining my thought and my.
But go back to Ike Taylor, Brian. Seriously,
So if there was Ike and Dan had a connection, and if Dan wasn't there and it was a different owner, Ike might have not had that connection, and Ike might actually Mike might actually have been greater because he had a mentor and a person in his life like Dan Rooney. That could be a possibility. Now, the other thing that Jeff was saying and Dave was saying about, well, owners are different everywhere and they're not the same and we're changing. Maybe Ben's looking across the country and looking over in Vegas now and what was Oakland and seeing that, Al Davis died and Mark Davis is 10 times as crazy and just as crazy as what his dad was, and sees the consistency of that. And maybe he wants the consistency here.
I wanted to bring it up with you all because I trust Charles' opinion. And I thought, these guys might have, maybe I am overreacting. I don't think that no one ever talks about Art II the same way they did Dan, even in a minute portion of that way. You don't hear them talk about him at all. And I find that odd. because I feel like every generation of player spoke about the Brunies in a glowing fashion. Ben's talking about a guy that passed away, 4 going on 5 years ago. So I don't know. Any other final comments about that, Dave? You good?
No, I'm good. Let's talk about this game coming up.
So, Dave, bring up the passing defense of the Baltimore Ravens. Do that.
Yes, you listened to Stat Geek, didn't you?
Yes, I did. And I was
kind of blow your mind?
I was floored. I'm driving home from work because I couldn't listen to it in the morning. I'm driving home. I'm like, oh my gosh, are you serious? Like, he had to make a mistake. Like, there has to be a mistake. If we're talking about Marlon Humphrey.
Oh, if I made a mistake, please tell me, because
I'm not saying you did, but I'm thinking
Brian
myself,
might be able to call me. I don't know. The Ravens are the 32nd ranked pass defense in the NFL.
That's absolutely incredible to me.
Dead last.
And that's per yardage, right?
275.7 yards per game.
Yeesh. I hate that.
Yeah. I knew. Well, and see, here's the thing, and this is what I'm going to say. You got to love it out there. Sometimes I feel like I want to be on what Yin's talking about, because I like them, taking the takes on Twitter and saying, this is what people are going to say, or this is what they did. Yeah. I was listening.
I love that.
I do too. Oh, quick story on that. I was listening to that podcast. I was finishing it up on a Saturday morning. While I woke up, I didn't want to get up. I was laying in bed. I put my headphones in. I only put the headphones in one ear because the other one was on the pillow. And my wife's like, "What's that noise?" It was the little going on the podcast. You can hear it through my headphones.
Anyway, my wife did the same thing. What the hell is that? And, I'm like, because I'm editing the show, and I'm like,
yeah,
I'm doing the same I'm doing the same clip like 3-4 times to get something perfect in there, and she's like, "What is that noise? Stop that!"
So here we go. When someone brought up the live chat, because this is exactly what I was getting at. The Ravens are the number 2 run defense in the NFL. And they're the number 32 pass defense in the NFL. So don't you think it would kind of make sense if they're really good against the run that teams would pass against them? Yeah. But what's going to happen on Sunday if the Steelers come out and in their first 20 plays pass the ball 17 times? Why aren't they running the ball? That's what people – if you want to know why they aren't running the ball this week, that would be why. Now, what's going to be frustrating is if the Steelers come out and in the first 20 plays – run the ball 18 times and have 1 first down. That would be frustrating, if you know what I'm saying. But I couldn't believe that when I looked that up, that I'm like, wait a second. I kept looking on the list and looking on the list and looking at the list. Like, did I miss Baltimore? Here I hadn't scrolled down far enough. They're at the bottom. I think one team that's played an extra game has given up more yards. But when you do yards per game, that puts them dead last. It's crazy.
Is this setting us up for an air raid game? Brian, is that what you're thinking? Because I hate this. Like I was like stunned when I heard that they're 32nd, but I also hate it because I'm also thinking, is this a 50+ attempt game from Big Ben, which is my first over under? Is Ben attempts 42.5?
Woo!
just take the over. I'm saying it now. Skip.
So are you saying Brian? You think that's how it's going to play out?
Yeah, it definitely will. I don't know if it's going to be a shootout with a lot of points, but there's going to be a lot of throws because I really think, and we've seen it in the past with the Steelers going up against run defenses that were 32nd and struggle to run the ball. But I really think this week that they're going to look at all of the ways that they can score, and they're going to try to do it through the air and try to stun this team through the air a whole lot more. They'll run the ball, but I really think that they're going to be pass happy. So I would take the over. I know we're not in that segment yet.
Well, Dave, I'll give you a chance. Over under 42.5 attempts by Big Ben.
Okay, I'm going to take the under on that, but I think it's going to get close to that number. I have to correct something. I screwed up something with the Ravens pass defense.
Oh my gosh!
I said that they were like 31st in yards, but the other team had an extra game. they're 30th in yards, and the other two teams had each played an extra game. So they're still 32nd. But it's Tennessee and Miami have given up more yards, but they've each played an extra game than the Ravens have.
Dave, I love you, man, but nobody was going to check that.
I would.
So you said you would have taken under
A 42 attempts,
42 and a half.
42 and a half. Yeah, I'm going to go under. I'm going to say 40 on the nose.
Okay. Do you have the injury report? I think it's worth talking about.
Injury report.
And I mean, it's going to take the next 10 minutes of this show to read the Baltimore Ravens injury report, but go ahead.
We'll go quick.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Robert Spillane came off the injury report because he's on the COVID list, but he wasn't going to play this week anyway. Some people thought he might. The way Coach Tom talked about it, he wasn't playing this week. He's done. 2 new players on the list today. Arthur Mollett missed practice with a quadricep, and Isaiah Buggs was limited with an ankle. You don't know if that was coming in and he couldn't do anything, or if he got hurt partway through. Buggs even was replaced on the depth chart to where he's no longer the starting nose, if you actually look at Steelers.com. So he was out anyway. Good news. Pat Freiermuth, 2 days of full participation. Okay. Good news. Trey Turner, that was a coach's decision. He came back. Okay. Good news. Chase Claypool moved from limited to full with the toe. Bad news. Zach Banner's been sick for 2 days, hasn't practiced at all.
Freaking Banner.
Bad news. No practice today for Joe Hayden. I was fine if he didn't practice on Wednesday and they eased him back in.
Freaking Hayden.
But wasn't he? I felt like he was close last week when he went limited. Oh, he's questionable. Then all of a sudden,
I bet he re-aggravated it.
I'm thinking that's what it had to be because he seemed closer last week, obviously because he practiced on Thursday at least a little bit than he is this week.
Do you want to get to just do the Ravens big players because there are some good names on their list. Don't read them all. Literally, listen to the Injury Report podcast. It's like 15 minutes and it's all their names.
I really don't know all their players. So
Marlon
tight end Nick Boyle, he didn't practice.
Marlon Humphrey's on the list.
Bradley Bozeman was back with a shin laceration after missing yesterday.
Rookie was on the list.
Yeah, he was on the list. I haven't even got that far down. The fullback, Ricard, did not practice. They use him. Miles Boykin, limited. Calais Campbell came back as a full participant from a concussion. So he's looking like he is going to play. But yeah, so that was the good news for them that he came back. But yeah, Marlon Humphrey, that was an illness. So you don't know about that. And yet, like you say, away. Then the other ones were coaches' decisions. So
yeah, Big Al got a day off. Today.
And Big Brandon Williams.
Alejandro. All right, let's do some over-under then. We already talked about Ben's attempts. Let's do Najee Harris attempts. Just attempts. 18 and a half. Dave, over-under.
Okay, 18 and a half attempts.
This is rushing attempts.
Over.
Okay.
19.
Brian?
I'm going to say under 17.
Okay.
I'm going to say...
You picked a good number.
I'm going to say under. I just don't think they run the ball a lot.
Yeah.
Let's go Najee Harris total yards. Not expecting a big day from the rookie. I have 90 and a half. Dave, what do you think?
Total yards, right?
Total yards, yes.
90 and a half.
I'm not expecting a big day from him. That's just me personally.
90 and a half. I'm not expecting a big day from him either in the rushing game, but I was thinking there's a possibility he could be used in the passing game. So I'm going to say under, but I'll make the statement now that I think he has more receiving yards than rushing yards.
Okay. Brian, over under 90 and a half total yards.
I'm going to say over for the same reasons that Dave said, but I just think that he might even break one catching the ball. He's absolutely correct. He's going to have more receiving yards than rushing.
I'm going to go under, but not by much. Not by much.
Yeah.
I think he's going to have a decent game, but it's not going to be like a breakout game. I hope I'm wrong. Steelers turnovers, 1.5. Bryan Anthony Davis.
We go under with 1.
All right, Dave.
That's going to be the difference of the game.
As
much as anything, can't turn the ball over. You saw what 3 turned into last week. I'm going to agree with Brian, say under and 1, just because they needed as a point of emphasis this week.
I'm going to be under with 0. I think they play a clean game.
I almost went 2.
Takeaways. Steelers takeaways, because the Ravens will turn it over, especially old Lamar. 1.5 takeaways. Bryan and Anthony Davis over under.
It has got to be over for them to have a chance at winning this game, even though Lamar threw 4 picks last week and they still have that horseshoe lodged all the way up there. I'm just going to go ahead and say that.
I just want to know how bad that hurts, man. And that's got to be painful. Maybe that's why he spent all the time in the locker room against the Browns last week or last year, because they had to be adjusters. I don't know.
He's always sick. My buddy thinks he has IBS.
To quote Kramer, yeah, I'm out. No. Okay, sorry we didn't let you answer, Brian.
No, we're good. You know what? They've got to force the turnovers. TJ Watt's your turnover forcing machine, and they're limited without him being there. If he is indeed not going to be there, so I'm going to say at this point, I still think it's going to be over. But if TJ's somehow in there, it's definitely over.
Dave,
you said 1.5, right?
Takeaways, yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna say over. I'm gonna go 2. I was really tempted to say both teams have 2, but I'd like to see the Steelers have 1. But look, the Ravens point of emphasis. But if they only have 2, they've cut them in half from last week, so that would be an improvement for them.
I'm gonna say it's over 2, and there's gonna be 2 interceptions. One by Minkah Fitzpatrick and one by Alex Highsmith. He gets him again. Remember, he had it last year.
Oh, that was a beautiful play.
That's my bold prediction. Okay,
bold prediction.
Bold, really bold. Lamar.
Why is that funny to me?
I don't know. Lamar Jackson rushing yards. I'm going to set it at 75. Over under Bryan Anthony Davis.
Over. Man, if Herbert and Burrow can kill you on the ground, this guy's gonna be tough. They've got to find a way to stop it, but I'm saying over.
Dave,
if I'm gonna have to put money on it, I'm saying over, because that's what's likely going to happen. I'm not saying that they can't keep him contained. I just right now I'm not banking on it.
I'll say under. What the heck? It's just wishful thinking. Okay. Let's do predictions. Let's go to predictions. Bryan Anthony Davis, or I'm sorry, Dave, what's the line? Is it 4? Did it go to 4?
It was at 4 at the beginning of the show. I'm going to double check it. I know on Tally site where we do our staff picks, it was 4.5. But through DraftKings, which is our official, that is our the official lines that we use from DraftKings. It is the Steelers +4, and the over under is 44.
All right, Bryan Anthony Davis, what's your prediction? Score.
Give it to final us. Score is going to be 23-21. A kicker is going to win it in this game. And this is where we're going to play Mad Libs. You fill in the kicker.
No, what's your prediction?
He doesn't know which team's going to win.
No, I don't want to say it, but my prediction is Ravens 23, Justin Tucker at the end.
Yikes. Okay, Dave Schofield, what's yours?
If you listen to Stat Geek this morning, I've got to follow how the numbers are really lined up. Okay. Baltimore on offense, they score 23.9 on average. The Steelers give up 24.3 on average. That averages out to 24 points, if you're going to round it and to a whole number, because I'm not going to make a prediction that's point something. And then the Steelers, they give up, they score 20.4 points. The Ravens give up 21.8 points. You average those, it's 21. So I'm going with Baltimore 24-21.
That's good. I'm going to say, a lot of people were wondering, is this the week that Jeff's going to pick against the Steelers? Well, you're going to have to wait another week. The Steelers win 26-24. Game-winning Chris Boswell field goal. I'm a homer. Hate it if you like it. I could care less what you think. That's my pick. Take them on the money line. Take the points. You got it. All right, Dave, trivia. You have it?
Yes. I'm glad you did it after we talked about the line.
Okay.
Because if you talk about the line is 4 points. I went back and I looked at the Pittsburgh Steelers versus the Baltimore Ravens, and I looked at the point spreads as reported by historically by Pro Football Reference. The Pittsburgh Steelers and Baltimore Ravens, since Baltimore came into the league in 1996 as the Ravens, in the regular season and postseason, they have played 54 times. How many of those times do you think the Steelers were favored by 4 or more? And how many times do you think Baltimore was favored by 4 or more? Let's start with the Steelers. How many times do you think they were favored?
You said in how many games? 54?
Out of 54 games, how many times do you think the Steelers were favored by 4 points or more?
I'm going to say his early years were rough for Baltimore at times.
That's a good thing to remember.
I'll say 15.
Okay.
I'm going to go 18.
Did you look this up, Bryan Anthony Davis? Because that's exactly correct. It is
No,
18.
That's just a guess.
It is 18.
Nice.
Now,
Wow.
to follow that up, what do you think the Steelers' record is in those 18 games where they were favored by 4 or more points?
12-6.
I'm going to say 10-8.
14-4.
Ooh.
So when they were favored by 4 or more points, they are 14-4. Let's now flip it over to Baltimore. How many games do you think that the Ravens were favored, not counting this one, by 4 points or more?
I'm going to say 9.
I'm going to say 18 again.
The answer is 6.
Oh,
1/3 of the games. What do you think the Ravens' record is in those 6 games?
1-5.
You think they've only beat the Steelers one time and
When they're favored by 4 or more. I'm just totally guessing.
I'm going to say 5-1.
So you say the opposite of Jeff. I was going to phrase the question. I was going to give it away by saying, what's the Ravens' record? No, let's go with what the Steelers' record is. Actually, it doesn't matter because it's the same answer. It is 3-3.
Okay.
Wow.
So when the Ravens are favored by 4 or more, they've only won half the time. How many times do you think the Steelers have covered?
I'm going to say every time.
I forget the number. Yeah, let's go out of 6. I would probably say, let's just say 3.
They have covered 5 of the 6.
Oh, it's close.
Guess what the one game was?
That they didn't cover?
That the Ravens or the
guess,
Ravens were favored by 4 or more and they covered. Meaning the Ravens covered, the Steelers did not cover the spread. So the Steelers had covered the spread against Baltimore when Baltimore was favored 5 out of 6
Was it the
times.
Byron Leftwich game?
It is not the Byron Leftwich game.
I would go ahead and say that debacle back in 2015 when the Steelers what was it, the Ryan Mallett game?
That was when the Steelers were favored by it.
Okay, the Steelers were favored big. Let's just say Christmas Day then.
Okay, see that one. I don't think the Ravens would have been favored by a lot because it was in Pittsburgh. Are you ready for it?
Is it
because I'll tell you, this is the first time that the Ravens have been favored by 4 or more in Pittsburgh.
Is it the opening day game in M&T Bank where they got absolutely shellacked?
It was not because that one they weren't favored by a bunch there, although they shellacked the Steelers.
Yeah.
But it was actually one of 2 games in his career where he did not start. It was the debut of one Benjamin Todd Roethlisberger in week 2 of 2004, coming in for an injured Tommy Maddox when the Steelers lost 30-13 when the Ravens were favored by 4 points. That was the only time the Steelers did not cover when the Ravens were favored.
Feeling better about my
Of course, none of that matters when you step onto the field on Sunday. I just thought it was interesting.
There you go.
I have a trivia question now.
Oh,
based on what Dave said.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. What player, when that happened, after Ben's debut, said to media, Don't ask me if I'm excited about playing with a rookie quarterback.
Easy. I know this. Dave, do you know this?
Don't ask me if I'm excited about playing with a rookie quarterback. I don't remember. I really don't.
Oh, I know. Do you mean answer?
Yeah.
He's just enshrined into the Hall of Fame, Mr. Alan Faneca. Yeah, those are fun moments.
Yeah. I don't know if that's the exact
I remember that now.
It was close. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was definitely a quote that was like, I'm not excited to play with a rookie. And then they rattle off 15 straight wins, AFC Championship game. Do not want to talk about that game. And so let's go to final thoughts. Brian, you already did yours. Do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, anything can happen. And to harken back to what I said before, you love this team. Don't go away and be the one that said, oh man, why'd I leave the stadium?
Dave, final thoughts?
Yeah, like I said before, that it's okay to be really, really down on the Steelers. It's really because we know you ultimately love them so much. It really is. And it's just the way that you are expressing that emotion. And it's okay. And I hope it's okay that I actually made you think about it and called you out if you're one of those people. But bottom line is, I'm not picking this team to win. I'm picking them to play better than last week. It's going to be I don't know, that much of a long, if you base it off last week's performance, it's a long shot to win this game. But I've said it many times, this team is not going to show up and play the same every single game. They just aren't. And all you're hoping is that it's not a worse version of what you saw last week. I will tell you this, I do not think the Baltimore Ravens are that good of a football team. But I also don't think the Steelers are right now either. So it should be fun on Sunday, and we know that's why they play the games, because anything can happen. Let's go Steelers.
This would be such a Steelers thing to do if they win. If they win the game and get everyone back on board, and then that's such a Steelers thing to do.
Yeah.
Okay. Brian, Dave, why don't you send us out?
Before we send us out, guess what we get to say? We're not going to be here right now. Next week, we're going to be watching the game. Can you believe there's another game next week by this time? That's crazy.
So we'll be doing this on Wednesday early like we did on Thanksgiving week for those that watch live, and that audio will be going out on Wednesday probably as well. So we'll be telling you more about that after. But hey, make sure you check us out on the post-game show. Dave, why don't you send us out?
Hey.
Let's go Steelers. Win a flipping game, please. Good Lord. We live in Maryland. All right, we'll see you later.